And hello and welcome to AleksTabletops MTG Sets Studies session 140 part 2. So today we continue to study Magic the Gathering sets. While everything is opening, I'm kind of decided to start talking a little bit earlier. So give me a sec to load the mobs and everything, and we will go. So yeah, hopefully it's done loaded. So yeah, quick second. Yeah, my name is Alex, this is Buddy, and I guess let's set the camera a little bit in a proper way and go. So yeah, today we continue to study Magic the Gathering sets. Again, for now we are in a vintage stage. We're working with vintage sets, which I consider the old sets, like the right from the beginning times of Magic. For now we're working with revised edition, which is, I believe, kind of a revised edition of Alpha, Beta, and Limited, plus certain cards from here, or maybe just a revisited version from the Alpha, Beta, and Limited. Maybe it has some cards from Arabian Nights and Antiquities, I don't know. We'll see basically that, if it's actually true or not. So, let me check everything. If it's working. So yeah, let's check the sound. Seems like sound works. Good. Okay, the thing is here. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And the last thing, and we could go. I believe intellectual maps already loaded. Good. Good. So yeah, Arabian Nights, Antiquities, and now revised edition. So yeah, the last card that to start with was a Clockwork Beast. So let's just find it in our. Here it is. So yeah, in a bit we're gonna start with that. It's happening here. Things are not working the way that they should. Yeah, so okay, let's continue. So Clockwork Beast. So this is artifact creature beast 04. It enters the battlefield with 7+1/+0 counters on it, which is again unusual thing for counters. Usually Magic has the amount of counters equally distributed from both sides on power and toughness, but in this particular instance, of course, we have kind of a different thing. We have only +1 counter from one side, which is again something that I believe I already covered. So let's just quickly check this thing out. I believe it's in MTG Study D. I don't know why they're placed this way. Let's just place them much closer together. It seems better. So mechanics, and let's just try to search for. Actually, I'm not even going to search for it. It's frequently used mechanic, definitely, and we need to find +1/+1 counters somewhere in here. It's basically just searching for numbers. It's going to be much quicker. Some counter, a creature with +1 counter attacks. Because there's a lot of things with +1 counters. Gets +6/+6. So yeah, we covered. So each creature you control gets +1/+1 for each of its colors. Here it is. Yeah, we actually covered this. So whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on another creature you control, you may put a +1/+1 counter on creature on this creature. So, and counters also could be unequal. Yes, so unequally distributed. Or unevenly distributed, like +1/+0 or +0/+1, in order to strengthen one of the parts. Good. And counters could be removed and traded to the different actions or buffs equal to the number of removed counters. Draw, discard, and buff. Yeah, this is something that actually we covered like quite a while ago. So let's just move on. So this part of the Clockwork Beast actually is pretty easy, nothing super complex about it. So the second part, at the beginning of combat, if this beast attacked or blocked this combat, then you have to remove this counter, one of those 7 counters that was put at the beginning upon its entering the battlefield. So yes, you have to remove one of those counters, and then if you want to put counters on this beast more, you have to pay additional price, and this ability can cause the total number of +1/+1 counter on the clock to be greater than 7. Activate this ability only during your give. Pretty cool. So basically, again, it seems like a complex one, but it's actually super easy. It works with triggered ability upon entering the battlefield, which basically triggers putting 7 counters, which is at the same time becomes a restriction that you cannot place more than 7 counters on this creature. Not necessarily you can, I believe, but you can't do this with this ability. So this ability can't cause the total number of counters on this to be greater than 7. So if you want to place or double the counters on this creature, you can do this, but you have to understand that once you using this ability, and I believe if this creature already has 7 counters, it doesn't matter how many mana you will pay, and by tapping this creature, you're not going to add more counters to it with this ability. So basically it restricts this ability itself. It's not necessarily restricts the amount of counters that could be placed on this creature. And of course also there is a caveat to that. At the end of combat, if you attacked with this card or blocked with this card, so basically if it was active, you have to remove one counter from it, which is actually a pretty cool balance. So again, nothing complex about that. So this is just a regular creature that triggers a certain ability upon entering the battlefield. Then then around this ability, everything else is set up for this card's mechanic. So then it works by removing those counters every time that this creature becomes active, and which is by itself quite interesting thing. I mean, we could create a separate mechanic or separate potential mechanic for the future that could read that every time that creature becomes active, it loses something or it gains something. So when it's not active, it basically doesn't have any abilities or whatsoever. But when it becomes active, we could actually add certain things to it. So this is something to consider. I guess let's just, one thing that we're gonna get out of this is let's triggered by action. By actions, I will describe attack and block. And again, I don't want to. We need to find the different description, not actions. Triggered by activity, because we have actions as something that's that happens inside of the game or outside of the game. So basically in-game actions, this is basically everything that revolves in the game itself. So activity, this is something different. Activity is more like something happens with the card itself. It's not necessarily so I mean when we're attacking, the card moves into attack. When we're blocking, the card moves into defense position. So because of this, I rather set the activity. So triggered by activity, in this particular instance, attack or block. But I don't want to put anything else in here because it's mostly works with attack and no block. And what I want to add to this, basically two things. So the first one, let's just mechanic or ability or even creature type can be triggered by activity, attack, block, etc. So what I want to add in here is kind of a pretty interesting thing that that this card basically inspired me to add is, again, so this card is based on activity. If it's active, if it attacks or blocks, then you have to remove certain amount of counters from it. Of course, we have like rather I don't know, connection to three parts of this mechanic. So upon entering battlefield, it sets the limit. Then this limit is basically restricted by a certain ability that could bring back those counters that we are losing, and of course the fact that we're losing counters each time that we're attacking or blocking. So this is a cool thing that basically kind of by itself, this card doesn't have that much of a special things to it. It's just a pretty cool card. It costs relatively cheap considering what it does and considering the 7/4 characteristics, and considering that you can put counters on it each time that you will remove it. Although again, it's kind of a problematic because each time that you will do this, if you make this card active, participant of the battle, you have to then bring back those counters for additional price, which could slow down the game itself. Either way, again, we're not considering like how good this card is and how effective it is. It's more like what it has potential for. And I believe it definitely has potential for just establishing a mechanic or potential mechanic. Basically, a mechanic or ability or even creature type can be triggered by activity of that card. So what I mean is, again, in this particular instance, we're considering attacking and blocking. So each time that this card attacks or blocks, these abilities, creature types, or mechanics could be activated, triggered, or whatever. So could be triggered / activated. And this is exactly what I want to add in here in specifications, that they could be added or basically removed. So it's just I'm trying to come up with the description. So triggers I don't know how to properly kind of form the sentence. So mechanic or ability or even creature type can be triggered, activated by activity of that card, attacking or blocking. So let's establish this by performing upon activity this card's mechanics and abilities and other things, types, are triggered / activated. And it just kind of seems the same, but no. When active, it's gonna be better. When active, this card's mechanic or ability or even creature type are triggered, activated. Also, it could happen, and of course the opposite thing when they are not active or when passive. It's more like just understanding that card could have an active state and card could have a passive state. In active state, card could behave one way, and in a passive state, card could behave a different way. So this is basically what I'm coming from. This is just an idea which actually could create a pretty interesting mechanic. So the card itself, when it's active, I mean, if it has this type of restriction, it basically, this card could force you to either constantly perform something in order for this card to basically work. Because if you're not going to do anything with this card, it just basically becomes passive and it's not doing anything. So if it has a certain like critical ability, but this ability only works when you make this card active, participant of the battle, then this card now gains these mechanics and abilities, and they could be triggered. And also, it could, again, if they are beneficial. But if they're not beneficial, which is the third part that we're going to establish, we'll finish that later while I'm remembering this. So this mechanics, so mechanic or ability or even creature types triggers. Let's just go this way. So triggers and activations. Activations could be, of course, could be beneficial, or the opposite. What's the opposite of beneficial? I don't know. Let's just figure it out. At least in how it's going to be in English. So there's a benefit and there's a disadvantage, or beneficial. What's the anonymous for it? I need to find it. Anonyms. Beneficial. Or antonyms. Harmful. Yes, so we basically need antonyms for beneficial. So hurtful, no. Harmful, worthless. We can work with harmful, or not necessarily harmful, disadvantageous. Yeah, let's go with this, because I don't want to go with a big word like harmful, because there's just like beneficial and the opposite of beneficial, that's it. So disadvantageous.
Beneficial, disadvantageous.
Yep, exactly those. Beneficial and disadvantageous, basically both of those things. Learning new words. Again, this is one of the reasons why I'm studying magic. So beneficial or disadvantageous. So again, if they're beneficial, that means of course that we could gain something out of them. If they're disadvantageous, that there's a potential to lose something. So in this particular instance, we kind of losing something every time that this card is active, and in order to then balance this thing out, we have to pay a certain price in order to do this. So in order to so basically this card makes this mechanic be disadvantageous more than beneficial. It kind of tries to balance this thing out, but again, if we so it's not necessarily forces us to, it kind of forces us to not sometimes attack and block with it constantly. It's more like specifically those properties of the card, like 7/4 already creates a pretty good and strong card to attack and actually finish opponent. So we don't necessarily need to think in the long term. So it's more like, okay, we putting this card on the battlefield and we finishing opponent as quick as possible. So for the long term, it's not necessarily the best card, maybe like for a longer game, because it basically slows down the whole thing. It kind of forces us maybe not to use it, or consider it, using it less. So yeah, triggers or activations could be beneficial or disadvantageous. That's it. And let's just finish this. When passive, this card, mechanic or ability, or even creature type are not triggered, not active at all. Not active at all. So they're basically cards empty. Card is empty. Which is an interesting kind of thing, because if we're going to consider a creature type, for instance, if we have a certain, like if opponent has a certain card that could trigger a certain type of creature, if this creature doesn't have a type when it's not active, I mean, it's not targetable. When it's not active, it basically doesn't pose any threat, and at the same time we can't act against this card. If this card is active, this is the only time that opponent potentially could react to it. which is kind of an interesting concept. So by doing this, basically what I'm doing is just creating a pretty interesting rules for this. So basically creating an active and passive state of the card, and of course, and also I want to make sure that this is understandable. These are two states of the card. So basically card can have two states, basically active and passive. That's it. So basically two of those things. So card could have two states, active and passive, and each state makes card unique to the surroundings. By that I mean, again, other cards could act to the surroundings. So opponent would act differently, react differently on this card depending on in what state this card is in, and etc. It's not necessarily zones. Okay, we could think about zones too, because like if this card in a zone of defense, it can be targeted. If it goes into the attack zone, it could be targeted or something like this. But in this particular instance, let's just consider the states. Also, we could think about zones too. Two states or zones. Let's just, well, we here active and passive, something like this. Continue. So again, continue. So again, we'll go a little bit quicker. Again, we don't have that much time. We have like maybe 30 minutes left till the end of the session. Again, this session is going to be quite short as always. Maybe we will make it maybe half an hour longer. We'll see. Oh snap! I'm going to sneeze. Ugh. Sorry about that. You may have clone. This clone enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. So again, I believe we already covered the clone type of cards. If not, we need to check this thing out, because I'm not 100% sure if we covered clones or not. We need to find and replace. We need spell check. No, we don't need a spell check. We need to actually find and replace. Just find clone. Just find copy maybe. So shapeshifter, you may have shapeshifter enter as the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. So yeah, it's kind of the same. So let's just call it so clone. Also, let's call it a clone ability. So shifter can be any card. So basically, it behaves like a clone. Behaves like a clone. Because, yeah, shapeshifter / clone. It's not necessarily cloning, because cloning could be considered a little bit differently, because like copying, cloning, and shape-shifting card into something kind of a different type of actions, I believe. Behaves like a clone. Let's, by the way, discover this topic of cloning. Kind of seems quite interesting. I'm not 100% sure, but let's just add 3 categories. It's going to be clone, there's going to be copy, and it's also gonna be a shapeshifter. Shapeshift. Shapeshift. Shift. Come on, man. Shapeshift. Druid? Seriously? Shapeshifter is a druid? I don't believe that. That seems weird. So, shapeshift. So, cloning, it's one thing, copying it's a different thing, and shapeshifting is a third thing. I just want to establish that we could take one. It might not be the right thing for the magic necessarily, but we could think about those three actions like something different. That basically we could create around one similar action, which is again cloning, copying, and shapeshifting, different meanings to them, and at the same time we could further complicate the rules of the game by keeping it kind of the same and somewhat simple at the same time. I don't know, it's weird because it's the same, it acts the same way, it behaves the same way, but it's not the same. So shapeshift, the way that I understand, you may have shapeshifter enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. So shapeshift is in here kind of described in a general magic rules as entering the battlefield as a copy of any creature. So as a copy. So it kind of seems like shapeshifting and copying at the same time. But we could consider shapeshift as something different, for instance, and think of shapeshifting as something like turn this card into card of your choice, for instance, that is present on the battlefield, that is present in the game. Again, right now I'm trying to go as far as possible from magic rules and kind of create, based on that, my own rules at the same time. So again, shapeshifting, turn this card into a card of your choice that is present in the game. Kind of seems the same, but again, it's a little bit different action. Copying, it's basically just make a copy of the existing card. It's basically kind of a duplication. When cloning, it's the same as copying, but not. Clone. So again, there is a quite difference, at least in how you would see both of these. So being copying or duplicating is basically make a copy of the existing card with the same make a copy of existing card make a copy of existing card by maintaining the original So it's kind of interesting. So copy and duplication is basically kind of, for instance, we're copying a card that opponent controls, but if opponent returns this card under our owner's hands, like into our hands, for instance, into its owner's hands, and the owner of this card is us, this card, we could replay this card multiple times and duplicate with this card different card. When shape-shifting, it's basically turning this card into a card of your choice that is present in the game, and losing the shape-shift thing, I believe. So in this particular instance, it's just like the act a little bit different. Cloning, it's kind of the same, but we're not maintaining the original status. So make a copy of existing card, make a clone of the existing card, and lose the original. and lose the original. So it's basically like complete clone. Complete clone. This is the only way how I could explain it in order for then later understand it myself better, because at this point I don't know where I'm getting from, coming from, and when it comes to this ability. But still, like clone again, make a clone of existing card by just card, yeah, existing card, and lose the original characteristics. So basically a complete clone. It's gonna matter only when we will return those cards back into its owner, and this is something that I want to also establish. So we're going to create summary, and in this summary I want to kind of point out that important when returning this card into its owner. Yeah, so again, for instance, this card, like Shapeshifter, I don't know, we need to think if Shapeshifter upon returning into its owner's hands will be back as the same state. So in this particular instance, I believe it will return into into the hands of the cloned card's owner. In this instance, it will return into our hand, our hand. It will return into the owner's hand, into the opponent's hand. Let's just go like into the opponent's hand, because we're thinking that we are cloning something. Like if we're cloning an opponent's card in a clone way, it's a complete clone. That means that it will return into the opponent's hand. If it's a copy or duplication, it will return into our hands, because this is just a copy. The card will maintain, we will maintain the original. It's not going to get anywhere. It will stay original. So when this card is returned back, we're going to get this card back, because we are the owner of this card, although we created a duplicate. When shape-shifting, it's going to be quite complex. It will return into our hand, but as a card that we turned it into, which is the thing that I tried to explain here. So it took me quite a while to create this difference, but again, you see the difference here. Hopefully you see the difference. Hopefully this is not just me seeing the difference. So again, in this particular instance, you're turning by shape-shifting, you're turning this card into a card of your choice that is present in the game, and upon returning in this card into your hand, it will return into our hand, but as card that we turned it into. So if we turned it into a creature 7/7, then we will get back the creature 7/7 card. So it's kind of an interesting way of looking at copying and shapeshifting and etc. This is kind of where I'm coming from here. Copy and duplication, again, it will return into our hand as the original that we played. So the card that we played basically will just return into our hand, and we could play it again and create a copy, basically a duplication. With cloning, it's a complete clone, which means that it will return into the opponent's hand. So basically we're losing the control. We're losing the control of the clone, because it's a clone of opponent's card, and it's just basically kind of turns it into a complete clone. So this is where I'm coming from here. It's actually quite an interesting concept, which has a lot of pretty interesting implications, which is pretty cool. So yeah, continue. So again, this is just a regular clone. Seriously? Whenever this blocks or becomes blocked by a non-wall creature, destroy that creature at the end of combat. Nothing special about this. I mean, this is just a regular card. It's creature flying. It's virtually doesn't have that much of a things. And whenever it blocks or becomes blocked, again, whenever something happens with it by a certain type of creature, then you will destroy that creature at the end of combat. So again, we don't want to put this one is in our intellectual map, I believe, because it doesn't have any kind of super specifics to it, I believe. It's just a regular, whenever it blocks or becomes blocked, destroy that creature on the end of the combat. But in order to not make this card super powerful, it works only by non-wall creatures. So if it's blocked by a wall will survive. But if it's not a wall, then this creature basically will kill that creature that blocked. That's it. So I don't believe that we need to cover it. It kind of seems like... No, skip it. Because again, it's just a combination of three different things. The specification of a card that could block or could not block it. It's kind of similar to this creature can't be blocked by flyers, or can only be blocked by reachers or whatever, or can only attack or block alone. So this is basically works around those type of mechanics. This just basically combines multiple things together and also adds a kind of a removal aspect to it. Just skip it. So artifact prevents the next 2 damage that would be dealt to you this turn. Again, just a damage preventer for a certain price. Sorcery, remove contract from below from your deck before playing. If you are not playing for anti, discard your hand, anti the top card of the library, then draw 7 cards. I believe we already covered this card, and in this particular instance I was questioning the understanding of playing for anti, because for me, like, I know what it means, but in this particular instance I'm quite confused. So I definitely remember we covered this card, so let's just try to find it we'll try first find it by the name. If we're not going to be able to find it by the name, because I might keep the name, no. Then we're going to fight for anti, because the for anti is definitely a phrasing that I kept without any changes here. So yeah, removes this card from the deck before playing it if you're not playing for anti. Here it is. So we actually stumbled upon the exact card. So anti basically deals with who goes first or has a choice to go first or not. Anti, the one who makes the choice, maybe. It's also kind of works with anteing up. So discard your hand, ante the top card of your library, then draw 7 cards. Each player antes the top card of the library. So again, it's quite similar to this, but discard your hand, ante the top card of your library, then draw 7 cards. See, it kind of actually the same. It also was in alphabet and limited. So limited edition alpha rare, limited edition beta rare, unlimited edition, and revised edition. Yep, so actually had this one before. By the way, this is actually a good indicator if we cover those cards or not, by just looking where those cards were. So if this card were in unlimited, that means that we basically covered it and we could skip it. I think. But since they are revisited, they have quite different rules to them. So because of this, we might actually kind of add them a little bit differently here. Okay, so this is the full text for this card now. So remove this card from your deck. So here, remove contract below from your deck before playing. If you're not playing for anti, discard your hand, anti the top card of your library, then draw 7 cards. So again, the thing stays the same. We're going to think about it a little bit later. I don't want to stick on that. Maybe at some point I will understand what it means in here. Because for me, it's quite confusing because I understand the thing that goes with anti. Like for instance, if we were going to put it in translation, so you see there's no like translation what it means. I mean, if you have an advantage, if you have playing first, then I believe you will be able to do this. If not, then yeah. And the top card of your library, then draw 7 cards. And anti the top card of your library is basically kind of look at the top card of your library. Or place the top card of your library based on your choice. So I believe this is it when it comes down to this card. Let's just continue. Enchant creature, you control enchanted creature, just a permanent enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice conventional unless you pay 2, and all mountains are plains. Again, land converter, or yes, basically it converts lands into a different type of lands. And also it, in order to keep it in play, you have to constantly pay a certain amount of mana to keep it in play. So you may have a copy. You may have a copy artifact enters. You may have a copy artifact enter the copy as a copy of an artifact on the battlefield, except it's an enchantment in addition to its other types. Again, just a copy with specifications that could target specific type of cards and creatures and let's keep it in play. Counter target spell, just a counter. Counter spell. Seriously, I mean the first cards were had pretty unique names, just straightforward names. Copy artifact, copy, control magic, counter target spell, counter spell. That's it. Oh snap! I mean, what do you want from the beginning? I mean, when you're just starting, you have to understand that rather than come up with an interesting names, you have to start somewhere. So calling a card that copies or counters target spell a counter spell, why not? It's just I believe if we encounter a card that's going to counter creature, it's going to be called counter creature or counter instant or counters whatever. So it's gonna be fun. So okay, enchant creature. When enchanted creature dies, this one deals damage equal to that creature's power to the creature's controller. Interesting one. I mean, you could look at this card as a trap. I already thought about adding such cards in intellectual maps, but then decided just stay away from it for now. Because when a enchanted creature dies, this one deals basically damage equal to the creature's toughness to its creature's control. So it's basically thing that you put on opponent's creature in order to then destroy it and make effect bigger by not only killing this creature but then it dealing additional damage to the creature's controller. So it's kind of an interesting damage dealer, but it deals damage in a different way. So we could actually find damage dealers and add this one as a specification to the damage dealers. Damage. Specific comes into play. Damage. Well, there's a lot of things with damage. We need to go into the bottom with damage. So yeah, damage activation. Certain abilities trigger where damage is dealt. Not necessarily this. So damage So deals damage to target attacking blocking creature, the number of damage. Next, damage you deal increased by, damage that dealt to you decreased by. There's a lot of things with damage. We could actually combine them into one thing. So yeah, these are frequently used mechanics. Let's just create a thing, call it damage, and put all those things in here that work with damage. Create a copy token or duplicate actual copy of this card. So we actually have another duplicate thing here. So I need to find shapeshifter and put it in there too. So yeah, here copy clone shapeshift, and we had here copy the token, because it's kind of not the same, because when we're copying a card it's one thing, but when we're copying a token it's going to work a little bit differently, because we're not going to be able to return token into its owner's hands. It's just going to disappear. So here shapeshifter, just to put them closer together, or duplicate and create an actual copy of the card. So yeah, I already kind of covered this ability, and I thought about how you could create a copy of the card in a different way, because create a copy, so basically a token, or duplicate, create an actual copy, it's quite a different thing. So this actually could work like as a fourth thing, like in addition to clone, copy, and we could create a different type of copy, like copy or duplicate. It's quite different. Like copy and duplication is actually could be separate. We'll get to that at some point. So let's just get back to the damage. So again, I want to combine damage. So number of damage in text. It could be equal for all of them. So the same. I mean. So let's just create a boundary here, summary. Put this thing in summary, and then put this thing here, and copy those things by deleting those. Here it is. So yeah, and also we're gonna add a new thing around the damage. Oh snap. Unfortunately, I launched the thing that I was supposed to launch. Okay, get back. How much time we have? Actually, almost pretty close to the end. No. So yeah, so I want to add this thing because it's actually quite interesting. So when enchanted creature dies, basically enchantment deals damage equal to that creature toughness to this creature's control. So this is just a different way to dealing your damage. In this particular instance, damage is dealt by means of a different cards. So it's not necessarily like direct damage, because we're talking about the direct damage and we talk about indirect damage. So basically damage could be direct or could be indirect. So direct damage is basically the one that you deal directly, and of course indirect damage, this is the damage like with this artifact. So this is artifact, basically the damage dealt is caused by a secondary source, not the primary source itself. So basically, let's just call it damage can be indirect. It's basically like deal X amount of damage that to X to Y to creature or whatever, or can be direct or indirect. Indirect, yep, indirect, which is again by secondary source. let's just put it in here by primary source and by secondary source. This is just kind of a way to think about it. Щоб может быть прямым по первоисточнику или косвенным по вторичному источнику. Не по, necessarily the right translation in here. It's more like от, from primary source and from. Yeah, let's just go with not by, but from is gonna be a little bit better. Yeah, and from kind of secondary source. It's much better. Much better. So yeah, this is basically secondary source. This is in this particular instance disenchantment. So these are kind of the primary sources, I would say, and this is the secondary one, and of course the number of damage in text. So we'll get back to damage at some point when we will go through the drafts, but for now let's just keep it at that. And let's just quickly go through cards until we'll stop on some complex ability that could take a lot of time from us. So destroy target artifact. It can be regenerated. That's artifact's control gains life equal to its converted mana cost. Again, just a combination of multiple things. Destroy target artifact, then creates a restriction that it can be regenerated. For the opponent, of course, not for us. For us, it's a good thing. And that artifact's control gains life equal to its converted mana cost, which is again gives opponent something in return. So yes, you kill the artifact, and an opponent cannot save this artifact, but at least the opponent will gain something in return. So basically, it's this kind of a thing. It's pretty common in Magic. It's basically kill something, but for cheap, and get something and in return. I don't believe that I covered this, so it's just or maybe I actually created something similar. I don't know. I don't even know where to put this information at this point. We have so many things. Demon. So let's just add this thing here. So instead of just After Effect, let's just go After Effect, and we're gonna add After Effect as kind of a things that comes after the action. After Effect, so after the action was taken, it's probably the wrong phrasing, either way. After the action was taken, so after action was performed, or was taken, or then it follows the after effect is follows. So for instance, destroy creature equals opponent gets life equal to that creature power, for instance. Something like that. So basically it's just kind of a thing that works this way. So like destroy or discard a card, like force opponent to discard a card. As a result, you will lose 1 life. So something like this. So you will lose 1 life. So for each time. And so basically, it's just the concept of creating an after effect in Magic. It has a lot of things. This is one of the most commonly used mechanics actually in Magic. Like even now we have like draw a card, lose life. Yes, so like draw a card, lose life. So it's kind of a trade-off. So you're basically kind of trading one thing into the other thing. If I'm properly understanding how it works. Just check this again. Trade-off. Compromise. Yeah, so it's kind of a trade-off. Seems like a compromise or something. So yeah, basically after effect. So again, destroy creature, but then if you will destroy, usually it's a kind of trade-off for cheaper price. So usually it works like the cards that are created with After Effects are usually a balance for a small price. Basically, balance for the small price, ideally. So yeah, basically establish that. Continue. So white creature get +1/+1, just a buff in the form of enchantment. Whenever a player casts a blue spell, you may pay 1, and if you do, you gain 1 life. Again, we already covered these type of cards, so basically it will help us to benefit from opponent's actions. So instead of whenever player plays a spell, nothing could happen. I mean, opponents just plays a spell, that's it. We actually could turn it into something good by paying additional kind of mana for it, and if we do that, we will gain additional life, or basically life that we wouldn't get if we didn't have this artifact in place. So basically, covered this one too. At the beginning of the upkeep of Enchanted Land's controller, cursed land deals 1 damage to that player. We already talked about curses, I believe, so we're not going to go into the curses anymore. So curse, I believe we covered curses. No, we didn't cover curses. Did we? Don't remember. Just curse. I believe we have at least 1 curse covered, because if we didn't, we need to create a complete unique thing for the curse, and it's probably not going to be today. So we have quite a curse here. 1 curse token. No, we have only 1 thing with curse, and it was in antiquities. Token could be anything, blah 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 blah, 1 curse token, etc. Yeah, we actually didn't talk about curses at all. We don't have any curse things. So we could establish like curse. Curse is it's directly just a curse. Permanent that you or your opponent has under their control. Basically creates one temporary disadvantage, harm. Let's just call it harm, because mostly curses work like more around harming the opponent. So permanent that you or your opponent has under their control creates 1 temporary harm. It also could create creates multiple small harmful actions. at the same time, at the certain turn. I don't know what to think here. So harmful certain turn parts. For some reason today my brain is not working well when it comes on to studying this. So curse, permanent that you or your opponent has under their control, creates one big temporary harm. Also, it could be that permanent that you or your opponent control has under their control creates multiple. So I would say multiple repetitive, or different small harmful actions at the certain turn phase. Let's call it like this. So yeah, at each turn phase, at each particular turn phase. So yeah, permanent you that you or your opponent has under their control creates repetitive, different, small, harmful actions at each particular turn phase. So this is usually how I believe curses work. So you're basically putting a curse on opponent, and then it basically creates certain thing. Also, curses could create benefits for you. This is also could be the case. So permanents that you or your opponent has under their control creates no. And they also could give you something. Like at the same time, they could give you this the opposite benefit. Like the opposite benefit. The same here. Opposite or different benefit. That's quite a lot. So yeah. So this is with the curse. So yeah, let's just slowly finish, because we will basically search through cards until we will get to something complex. So flying. This creature, again, just a regular flyer. That's 3 mana, regular 1. So again, remove this one from your deck before playing. If you're not playing for ante, again, you own target card in the ante. Exchange that card with the top card of your library. Again, everything that works with ante basically kills me. So I don't know what it means in most cases, because only by looking at this in practice I would be able to figure it out how it works. Other than that, let's just find another thing with ante up, for ante. And add just the additional thing with ante right here, because everything that works with ante, I just don't get it at this point. This is just every time that I'm so it's kind of the same, but you own target. Oh, wait a minute, I already actually established all those things. You own target card, so it's basically kind of the same thing. Yeah, remove this card up on the ante, and then I covered all things that anti works. So discard in your hand, Oni, and each player then anti up the top card. Yeah, so this is basically one beginning of the mechanic and then 3 different ends. Understood. So we already covered it. Cool. So continue. Regenerate target creature again just allows you to regenerate things. Counter target spell as enchantment for a certain price. This is interesting counter spell, but again it's restricted to a certain color counter. Target spell or permanent becomes black. Mana symbols on that permanent remains unchanged. So again, just turns the creature into a different color identity, or basically changes the color identity. Or maybe this is not necessarily changing the color identity. This is just changing the color of the card itself. But because when mana symbols remain unchanged, that means that color identity is not changed. Oh, this is also quite unique thing that we could think of. Like we could think of color identity is another thing that we could think of, like color identity, what it means. So basically, identity is like can be changed. And yeah, the color identity can be changed. Color identity of the card can be changed. And what basically means color identity is, so color identity in most cases is mana that represents the card slash mana that card represents. So this is the thing to think about in the future, because it's not the same mana that represents the card. This is basically the mana that's tied to the card. So for instance, if this card is black, it has black mana symbols in it, so basically it means that. So mana that represents the card. But also we could think about mana that card represents. So this is a little bit different. So mana that card represents is, the card could be black, it could have on top for its converted mana cost black mana too, but it could have, for instance, green mana as a representation. So this mana will be represented by this card. It basically could change the color identity. So, and this is kind of a question, what exactly the color identity is, and we will get to the color identity a little bit later, but for now let's just put it in here to think about. Once we will get to the color identity, we know that we started to talk about it, and we will make it a little bit better, because again, like this thing also could be added as a specification. So for instance, like target spell or permanent becomes black, but mana symbols on that permanent remain unchanged. It's just kind of as a thing to think about why we need this. So usually we need this understanding in order not to get into confused situations, because sometimes card could get benefits from the mana symbols in this permanent, or based on its actual color of the card. So it could seem could become quite quickly confusing. From the deck before playing it, and each player enters the top card of the library. So again, another thing with anti thing. So let's just get back to the anti, find replace. No, just anti. Yes. But until the top card of the library. Why I have 2 of those things? Please tell me. Cards on the... There's just duplicates. Let's just delete this one, because this one basically... Here it is. So each player enters up the top card of the library, and here we have exactly it. Good. So, tap, destroy target land at the beginning of your upkeep unless you pay 3 tap demon and sacrifice a land of an opponent's choice. I mean, again, nothing super complex. It seems complex, but it just has a lot of small combinations into one. Search a library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle the library. Again, just a card searcher basically. Destroy target permanent, destroy. Whenever a land is put into graveyard from the battlefield, this one deals 2 damage to that land's controller. Again, whenever a land is put into graveyard from the build, so basically whenever a certain type of card is put into like certain place, from certain place, this one deals damage. So again, another indirect way of dealing the damage. So destroy target artifact or enchantment. Again, just destroyer. This one deals X damage to any target. If it's a creature, it can be regenerated this turn, and if it would die this turn, exile it instead. So I believe we already covered exile it instead thing, if I'm not mistaken here. Zone transference. So cards can re-enter zones that they have been in after being replayed once. If a zombie would be put into a graveyard from the battlefield, exile it instead. Also deals X damage to the target. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So yeah, we covered exactly that card. Should be cool. So attack the player discards a card, activate this ability only during your turn. Again, nothing super special, just target player discards a card and activate this ability only during your turn. So again, it kind of restricts how we could activate it. Dragon gets +1/+X until end of the turn for 2, nothing special. So whenever this one gets +1/+0 until end of the turn, or just for paying, it will becomes. Is this creature the one that's? Yep, I remember this dragon. Cool. Because it's quite similar based on the name and based on this ability, what it does. If ability has been activated 4 times this turn, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So again, kind of creates restrictions of how many times we could activate this ability and make this dragon stronger. If it's going to be activated more than a certain amount of times, then we have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So again, if you want to deal a little damage by not being bothered by the fact that it's going to die in the end of turn, it doesn't matter for us, we're just going to deal a little damage. If not, it's better to save it for longer and basically continue to attack with it. Seems like nothing special here, because again, it's kind of makes the card strategically much more interesting, because we could use it strategically aggressive and then lose it, but at the same time deal more damage, or potentially deal lethal damage, or we could keep this card in the game for quite a while longer. In that case, we have to control how many times we could activate this ability. Spend only black mana and cast this one in X with Draining Life. Drain Life deals X damage to any target. You gain life equal to the damage dealt, but not more life than the player's life total before the damage was dealt, the planeswalker's loyalty before the damage was dealt, or the creature's toughness. So again, just creates restrictions around how many life we could gain based on the damage that we dealt. So we could deal any amount of damage that we can, but we're not able to gain life equals to that damage. It's going to be restricted by the total, not more than life total before the damage was dealt, or the planeswalker's loyalty before the damage was dealt, or the creature's toughness. It's kind of just creates restrictions around gaining life, kind of again balancing act. Most of the cards are actually have complexity in their text based on the balancing things. In most cases, yeah. Attack the player activates a mana ability of each land they control. Then that player loses all unspent mana, and you add the mana lost this way. So again, target player activates a mana ability of each land they control. Kind of forces the opponent to activate all abilities. Then the player loses all unspent mana, and you add the mana lost this way. Kind of interesting. So it's kind of a draining mana from the opponent. I don't believe that we actually have this, although since it was in Unlimited Edition, I believe we covered it. But if not, let's just add this, because it's actually quite a unique thing. So top all lands target player controls and that player loses all spent mana. Yeah, we actually covered it. So kind of with instant spells and could be used. And also let's just add how it works. So basically you drain, so you force opponent to produce mana and you drain that mana. So it's just kind of the way that it works, which is pretty cool. So yeah, we covered that too. Cool. Again, I believe most of the things were covered here. Because of this, I'm trying to go a little bit quicker, because again, I don't want to spend on revise too long. It has too many cards in it that we could spend for probably more than a month of doing so, maybe even 2. So in order to not prolong this experience, I want to go a little bit quicker. So regenerate the skeleton the next time this creature would display. Again, we talked about regeneration, it's already covered. Target creature with power, did we? So again, virtually we're kind of finishing this session. I just want to find a card that I want to stop and decide, okay, this is the card that we're going to continue next with. And again, the next time we will be back with MTG Set studies are going to be the week after. So next week is going to be based around playing Magic Arena, and then week after that is going to be MTG Set studies are back. So, and from now on we're going to go this way. And this is the reason for second part of 140 is that episode. Target creature with power 2 or less can be blocked this turn. Just again, kind of pretty simple. Sacrifice an artifact, put +1/+1 counter on target creature. Activate this ability only during your upkeep. Again, you have to sacrifice something in order to gain something, and also restrictions when exactly you could be able to activate this regular creature elemental. So whenever enchanted enters the this one enters the battlefield. If enchanted creature has flying, this one deals 2 damage to that creature, and Admirals gains enchanted creature loses flying. Wait a minute. Enters the battlefield. If enchanted creature has flying, this one deals 2 damage to that creature, and this one gains enchanted lose flying. Let's just keep on this card and kind of finish on that note, because I see quite a lot of potential with it, but I don't necessarily have brain at this point. I'm kind of tired to go through it. So this is going to be our card that we're going to continue with. So, and this is it. So yeah, let's just save and finish for today. So again, today we covered quite a lot of cards. We started somewhere in here and then went for quite a while. Hopefully in the next session we will finish the first page and rather quickly we will go through the next pages, because again, the more I study this set, the more I understand that most of the cards were already covered. So in most cases I'm not going to be super cautious about certain cards. Most of the cards are already in our collection, especially if we see like unlimited edition in here. That means that we probably covered it. So, and in case we didn't, of course I would try to come up with something. So yeah, this is basically then sums up our session for today. Thank you for watching. Again, thank you for being here. Have a nice day or night, and see you in the next session, which is again next Tuesday. This is gonna be MTG Study sessions when we're going to play Magic Arena in English. Then on Friday the same but in Russian. What the heck was that? I basically created a bubble with my teeth. It was fun. Yeah. And the week after the week of playing Magic Arena, we will get back to continuing to study revised edition where we left off. So yeah, on that note again, bye. Buddy says bye, and see you next time.